Alright guys, welcome to your third Android tutorial. In this tutorial we're going to be going over services in the Android system. We'll be reviewing the different types of services and what the Android interface definition language is, which is this AIDL. Alright guys, an Android service is a component that performs those long-running operations in the background. It does not provide a user interface like activities do. These services can be started from another activity. It does not provide a user interface. Another object can start a service and it will continue to run in the background even if the user switches to another application. This could be in the form of like a download or an upload of a file, like when you're downloading a JPEG from the internet, then you go to listen to your music, which is another form of service. You could be listening to music and downloading a JPEG online and then going to your calling app. The music and the downloading would be a service because they're a long performed action that takes a lot of time to actually do. And the reason this is important is because the Android system will send that ANR, Android not responding, and your user will have the option to wait for your application to catch up or force close. Most of the time people will force close because they think that your program's having an error. What actually is happening is the Android system runs on a single thread. So when you try to use too much time in that single thread, the phone essentially breaks it down and says no because that's too much control over the main thread that the phone runs on, so you'll end up taking over the phone essentially. So if your program runs for too long or it takes too long to perform a certain action, the Android system will shut it down to conserve memory, to conserve resources, and in order to combat that, that's what a service is. There's different types of services. A bound service is when an application bounds itself by calling bind service. A bound service runs only as long as another application is bound to it. Multiple components can bind it to a service, but all must be unbound for the service to be destroyed. To create a service, we have to create it as a subclass of the superclass service. You will also need to override some callback methods that handle key aspects of the service lifecycle. Some important ones to know are onStart command, start services, stop service, onBind, and onCreate methods. And we will be discussing these in more in-depth coding tutorials. These are just the explaining how Android works PowerPoint tutorials. Like activities, we have to declare in the application's manifest file. Services have life cycles that are independent of the component that they're working with. A service, this is a picture of the service lifecycle. A service can notify the user of events using toast notifications or status bar notification. A toast notification is a message that appears on the surface of the current window for a moment and then disappears. So that little window that pops up sometimes. And the status bar notification shows an icon in the status bar along with a message. That could be an activity. That could be notification that launches an activity. It could be a reminder. Bound services come to light, especially when it comes to a client-server interface. To create a bound service that works with a client-server interface, we will need to provide an iBinder that clients can interact with, or we can use a message, which is an interface that can work across different processes, or using AIDL, which we'll be going over in the next slide. AIDL stands for Android Interface Definition Language. It allows us to define programming interface for clients and services to communicate with each other. Normally, access to the memory of a process is not allowed. Using AIDL, it's necessary only if you allow clients from different applications to access your service for ICP. ICP is inter-process communication. It describes how different types of Android components are communicated with. This is done through tints, bundles, and binders. Binder communication It also describes how different ways that Android components are communicated with. To create an AIDL interface, we must actually create a file using Java, end it with an extension called AIDL. Then we save it to our directory. Once we create it, then we implement it and then expose the interface to clients. But that's more coding, and we will be dealing with that in a couple of tutorials. Alright guys, that was just a really basic tutorial on services. In our next tutorial, we're going to be going over content providers and intents. And so I'll see you guys in the next tutorial.